Welcome to the CFO Track podcast, where we inspire and educate future finance leaders to help them stay on track to CFO. I'm your host, Tom Hunter, and every week I'll be bringing you stories from some of Australia's best and brightest CFOs and the lessons they learnt along the way. My goal for the podcast is to provide learning and development opportunities for those wanting to get to the level of the guests on this show, but they just didn't have the access to those lessons otherwise. Let's get into it. On this week's episode, I'm joined by James Haslam. James is the CFO of Elmo Software. James's career is slightly different to most, where he spent the first 18 years in the consulting space across the Big Four before taking his first full-time role in a commercial business as the CFO for Elmo Software. James is a brilliant operator, especially in the capital raise and IPO space, and discusses the challenges of staying so long in the consulting space before taking your first role out into commercial. This is a great episode, and I think you're going to enjoy it. So here we go. James Haslam, welcome to the CFO Track podcast.
Thanks, Tom. Excited to chat today.
How are you? How's the week been?
Oh, good, mate. It's every week is a new week. It's busy. There's always a lot of high priority items to do. So the business is in great shape and keep moving forward.
It's fun. I think when we last spoke, you had a few different deadlines around your neck. How are you tracking with all that?
Deadlines come, they go. Then new deadlines come on board. So it's a perpetual motion. I think there's always something to do. There's never a dull day.
Never ends, does it? So I've given the listeners a bit of an intro already to yourself, but I can never do it justice. So it'd be good to get a bit of a feel for where you are at the minute and what you're up to.
Great. So James Haslam, the Group COO and CFO at Elmo Software, in the HR tech space, basically selling hire to retire solutions to customers across Australia, New Zealand, and the UK. I've been in the role now since 2019, initially as a CFO. So I've been here just over six and a half years now. Evolved to the COO role in 2023, 24, and coming off the back of the sale and delisting of Elmo off the stock exchange into the sale to K1. So really run a range of tasks that not just goes beyond just financials, really into operations, sales operations, legal risk, corporate development. So quite a wide net that I cast now.
Absolutely. Well, we'll come back to that in a minute, but it'd be great to hear about where it all started. Like what prompted accounting for you? Where'd you come into it?
Good question. What prompted accounting? I can definitely say that when I was growing up in my teenage years, I wasn't aspiring to be an accountant. That I can definitely affirm that. I'm not even sure through university I was aspiring to be an accountant either. I'd say I fell into it a little bit. Going through those early years, first 2 years of university, getting to the point where everyone starts to panic at the end of the second year. They need an internship, and I was sort of looking for what should I do? I didn't really know. I didn't know who the different players were. I couldn't decide between various career streams at that point. I hadn't really been career focused at all. Sort of following a bit of a sheep, following others into like the arena of doing these internships. So whether it's banking, consulting, accounting, etc. Managed to land a couple of interviews. One being at KPMG, and so I did an 8 week, I think it was 8 to 10 week stint back way back now to 2000, year 2000, I think it would have been in KPMG. So sort of got my feet wet in accounting there, and then naturally that evolved to obviously must have gone well because they offered me a job off the back of it, and then sort of. My final year of university, I had the security of having a job off the back of my third year, but depending on grades, etc. But sort of fell into it early, and then got into it full go from 2001.
Gotcha. And so you went into audit from memory. Is that right?
Initially, it was audit. That was that was sort of the general graduate function was going to the audit practice, and so that I did that through my training. Let's say you have a training contract, so I did a 3-year effectively training contract to qualification. So through my qualification years, 3 years in audit, and then I did a 4th year. This is where I started to evolve my career. Once I got to that point, I wanted to have a look at what else you could do because there's multiple options come when you become chartered. So you can leave to go to the corporate world. You can go more into consulting type world. You can go into the banking world, or and I moved to the advisory piece. So that's the first taste of doing something different with the qualifications. I was quite interested in the distressed environment. So it was called restructuring or insolvency. I was quite interested in there. So I moved over across into that function for 12 months.
Is that transition relatively easy? Is there similar pressures to starting a new job itself, or is it pretty straightforward, that transition?
I haven't to think back in time, but the beauty of the Big Four accounting firms is that they make it very easy. So you would have people that have, this path has been trodden before. I wasn't a trailblazer saying, I've done my 3 years of audit, I'm going to do something else. I think that was a quite a common model and an encouraged model, because they're looking to continually like recycle their talent. So I actually found the transition easy culturally, because you're going in the same company, the same type of people that you've been working with before. But technically it would have it's more challenging because it's a new skill set you were having to learn. So less about audit compliance, where you're reviewing a set of accounts or reviewing the bits that make up the accounts, into a world where the company is actually, the decisions that you now are making decide whether people keep their jobs or not. And that was tough. That was one of the hardest points of my career. Would have been 25 years old, and having to go to I think they were like a hire company from memory, where they're like hire cherry pickers, things like that, to for construction sites, and having to shut the company down. And at 24 years old, having to walk in on your own and make 45 people redundant because the company couldn't be saved is a heavily confronting thing. And you've gone from the safety of spreadsheets and ticking off numbers, etc., with layers of people above you to review your work and make sure everything's right and file a set of accounts. That moving from that environment into an environment where you're literally you're telling someone that tomorrow they've not only have they not got a job, but you probably can't even pay them what they were due to be paid either. And you don't know anything about their circumstances. And that was heavily confronting at quite a young age, to be able to have to go into that environment. So when you talk about how hard was the transition, easy internally, but the external focus, very different.
How did you manage that? Or how did you get through that? That must have been super challenging.
Yes, I think definitely was challenging. And I guess each time in my career that you have different challenges when you transition into different type of roles. So for me, and really now, digging back through, I think it was generally the way I work is I push through. I have this sort of ability to push through, take on the next challenge, and just keep running sometimes, and sometimes to a fault. And so I think in this case, it was, I've got an opportunity. I'm going to take the opportunity. I've picked up what knowledge I can pick up. I'm going to deploy that knowledge I picked up. And I might be a bit wrong, but hopefully I'm more right than I'm wrong. And just sort of embrace it, and being relevant. I think it's that sort of relevancy, being that value add sort of mentality is, I'm going to make a difference here. And sometimes the difference will be good, sometimes it'll be bad, but I'm going to be I'm a difference maker in this environment. And therefore I will take on that challenge. And I think it's more that sort of mental, I guess, that mental resilience sometimes that comes in. That you just have, take it on.
Yeah, that's fair. Did you ever get that feeling at that 3 to 5 year mark when most typically leave Big Four and go into commercial? Did you ever get that inkling?
Definitely. So the 3 year mark, so I've left the audit side and I've gone to try something else, which is quite a safe move because you're moving internally. And then, but then go to the year 4, so end of the year 4, going into year 5, it's like, well, really a change of scene is now sort of saying, mid-20s, there's still a lot of opportunity out there. So that's where the Australia thing comes. This is all UK. So my formative years all UK, where I was born. Moving into 2005, it's like, well, it'd be really interesting to try another country and try a different culture. If you think Australian English is much different, but it was maybe it was driven partly by also wanting a holiday and it being really super expensive to come to Australia. So I took the opportunity on the secondment program again. This is within KPMG. They offer a very evolved global mobility program where if you want to work somewhere else in the world, they could facilitate that. And they because it's the cross-skilling and of their staff. And I guess there's a lot of Australians were coming back to work in like London, etc. So this was reciprocal. So that 5 year mark was definitely that point of, well, I want to do something in another country. And Australia was my pick over other places. And yet, again, making it happen. So leaving KPMG at that time wasn't really a thing because there was still so much opportunity ahead.
Is there a certain level of expectation or pressure with that transition? Do you need to prove yourself again and get early wins on the board? Is there anything like that?
100%.
Yeah.
100% you have to prove yourself. You might know some people that have gone before you and you sort of follow them. So but your work does not transcend, or at that time, it would not transcend borders, right? The work I'd done in the UK didn't translate to any work in Australia. So you are starting effectively from ground zero again, trying to build yourself up, show people what you can do. There's different, and there was different ways of doing things. At that time, there was a lot of change as well. The sort of whole accounting world was changing with the adoption of the IFRS or international accounting standards coming in, and the UK was in a different timeline to Australia. So it was sort of like a technical leap, and there was also the cultural leap and sort of geographical leap. of moving countries. So there was a lot of change happening very quickly. And also at that same time, so I wanted to come to Australia, but the restructuring and insolvency work that I had been doing in the UK wasn't required here because KPMG had divested what was there, well, it was still McGrath Nickel.
Right.
They had divested. And
Yeah.
so I couldn't come over and do the work that I was doing. I had to
Yeah.
come back into the world that I had left before.
Right,
I had
okay.
sort of there's a lot of change happening all at one go, and I probably
Yep.
hadn't sort of thought that through, like all these changes are
Yep.
happening and how that was going to affect me and what was going to happen next because there was a lot. And I just sort of ran into the fire, if you like, on this one, thinking, well, again, it's KPMG, it's quite safe, it's a well evolved program, a lot of trust in the program, and then moving on to the next chapter.
Yeah, sure. And what were the first few years like into that transition?
Really fun, to be
Yep.
honest. I think it was very much collegiate type atmosphere. A lot of people similar age, in a similar backgrounds, sort of working together. So the big expat community. Actually, that surprised me a bit. I was expecting to be a bit more Australian heavy, but actually, all my sort of year group, the sort of year above, the year below, we're sort of in the same sort of stage of the career, but all
Mm.
come from over the world. So you had a lot of Brits, Americans, Canadians, South Africans. It seemed to be a lot, sort of big cohorts of these groups
Yep.
working together, but all away from home, from where they'd grown up. And I think it was quite a lot of fun in those years, sort of as you went through, graduating up from, I guess, your formative years into that sort of management level after that.
Yeah. What was the progression like? 'Cause I think you moved through maybe 3 or 4 levels while you were with KPMG, right?
I'd say progression could be choppy. It really
Mm.
depended on many factors. So yes, I would have progressed a few levels over the time there, and it's quite a well structured path. And so I think it could be quite rapid, but it also could be infuriatingly slow as well, and driven a lot by results and who. Sometimes I think who mentors you as well, so that you'd have different sort of levels of mentors. So if you had a really strong mentor, they could really carry you and help you through and guide you. If you had a
Mm.
weak mentor, that it could take a lot longer just because you weren't picking up some of the requisite skills. So it really varied. I wouldn't say that anyone has. I think there's quite a linear path from graduate all the way to the manager level,
Mm.
and then you've got some like levels like associate director, which seem to be like a more time based than anything else. But you had that there, but getting from that point up to partnership, that gets much more tetchy at that point, much more
Sure.
tricky.
Were there any particular challenges in terms of making that progression pathway?
I think the biggest thing that I would have encountered was we had a couple of events happen over time. There was like the GFC
Yep.
happened as well. So there's things that happened in those years which really changed the dynamic of the economy and the
Mm.
level of work and the work I was doing in what we call transaction services, corporate
Yep.
finance world was heavily transactional as it sounds,
Yep.
right? So it's project based as opposed to audits, which were continuous. So your work could go up and down. So if there's a big shock in the economy, it could actually drive a lot of activity negatively. And if there's lots of growth, lots of lending, lots of M&A activity, that would drive up the amount of activity. So I
Yep.
think there was a little bit of that where the volume of work would dictate sort of how you progressed. One of the biggest challenges I think I saw, and I think that the firm's a lot better than this now, is where you move between divisions. Theoretically, that should help you grow with new skills and you become
Right.
better. But I think that what I probably experienced was if you stay in the same function, in the same vertical, you would progress faster than if you did wider experience. Now, I think that changes later on. I think the width of experience can help unlock things later. But if you want to progress quickly at the firm, you want to really focus on your channel, and you could do
Okay.
it really, really quite quickly. And if you do extra or you go outside and do other things, that it could actually, I personally felt it could slow things down a little bit, for me, that did happen,
Yep.
which ultimately led to me realizing that I needed to take control of more of the changes than let the changes happen to me.
Yep. And I think you were saying previously you're an early adopter of parental leave around that time as well, right? Was that then?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. I don't think it was common. I think it is more common now, and hopefully
Yeah.
it is more common.
Yeah.
But I do remember taking, I think for my son Oscar when he was born, I think it was like a 16 week. It was a great scheme. I mean, they're
Yeah.
running
Yeah.
great schemes because it's all about the employee value prop for the accounting firms. They do lose lots of good people for various reasons, and to retain people, retain talent, having great
Mm.
schemes like that is fantastic. And yeah, I took that, and it was a real game changer, I think, in my mindset. Just going through that and having to look at life through a different lens and taking
Yep.
away from, the sort of, 10, 12-hour days you could sometimes do in this project work into having no actual work to do because you literally are so almost deactivated from from all the systems, and you just focus on that to have a full-time job to look after someone who's less than 1 year old, and you got
Sure.
literally had not much idea, no family either. Remember,
Yeah,
no
yeah.
family, all in the UK. So
Yeah.
to go through that process was a pretty amazing experience, and I'd always encourage people to do it if you get the chance,
Mm.
because I think I actually learned a lot about myself as well in that time.
What year was that?
Oh, 2011, I think it was.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
What was it like within the business at that time, taking the leave around your work and all that, and taking the time off?
I think it was an evolving process. So
Yeah.
this is when I was still at KPMG. I think they had launched these great schemes, and in some aspects it worked, and some others it didn't. I think there was definitely, they were on a learning curve to get
Mm.
it right.
Yeah.
It wasn't actively promoted to take them. I think it was more
Okay.
employee led. Like, instead of the employer saying, "Hey, we've got these great schemes, you should access these things," that was at that time. It was more like, I know, I'm aware of this scheme, I should take it, and you push for it, as
Yeah, yeah.
opposed to someone saying, "Hey, you do that," and having that sort of practice. I think they were still on that learning curve. I'm hoping now it's a lot easier and smoother to do and more accepted. But I think there was a general feeling that it was quite new. It felt quite new. Acceptance wasn't necessarily high
Okay.
in much more senior levels. So in the partner ranks, people taking it was maybe seen more negative than it is positive, which I think has
Okay.
changed now. But
Yeah.
I definitely would have felt that at the time. Yeah.
Yeah, fine. So you definitely don't regret taking it or anything along those
No,
lines with.
no, no. I think there was a view that taking it would be harmful to your
Okay.
career progression, right? I think and whether that was just hearsay, but I think definitely in the ranks of those sort of people in age group would be, if
Sure.
you take it, it's going to slow things down. It's going to delay your promotion like 12 months or longer.
Sure.
And that was a real sort of fear. And to be fair, it factored in my decision making as well. I mean, and look, I'm a capitalist, I guess, at heart, right? So the way I
Sure.
looked at it was, I'm going to save a load of money here, right? So if it goes down to my decision making, one is, I've got an opportunity to build a bond with my
Yeah.
son who's less than 1 year old, and I can spend 16 weeks doing that, and doing all the fun stuff that he was going to get up to,
Yeah.
and experience that. And the other side of it was, daycare, my God, is like $120, $130
Yeah,
a day.
yeah.
I mean, that's a crazy amount of money, and I get a little bit of money back from the government. But my God, just on pure economics, I need to take it. And
Yeah.
deferred promotion, I mean, you don't even know. That's an uncertainty. So without a guarantee, you're like, well, it might be pushed back 12 months. It might not be pushed back 12 months. It might never happen. So when I just work the numbers, it's like, I could actually, for cash flow reasons, I would just do it
Why
because
not?
of
Yeah.
for economics, right? So economics plus
business.
personal ended up helping the decision. So certainly, it did factor in that this could harm my progression. And I think it did, if I'm honest. I think it actually
All
did
right.
slow me down. And then I found, when I came back, I was, seconded, let's say, to another division, and straight away. Like, it wasn't like I came back into my old team and spent, 3 or 4 months there picking things back up. It was, came in and go to this other team. Right.
Okay.
It was a bit
Right.
like that. So that was probably the first time that, when I look at my KPMG career, and I have a lot of love for KPMG, I had a great time. It was the first time then I looked at it and went, I'm not really in control of where I'm going.
Okay.
I'm actually
Right.
at the whim of what they want to do, and I
Yeah.
don't control my career, and I don't control my trajectory right now, because this is the first time I've made a big decision. Oh, you could say going overseas, you could say going different division, but it was the one time that I've gone back and said, I'm cashing in some value here, and I'm going to get something paid to me that the firm doesn't benefit from, other than potentially my retention and life experience and that sort of stuff, and just maturing. It was the first time I probably saw what happens when you're not necessarily following the script.
Sure.
But this is 2011, right? We are talking a long time ago.
Yeah,
Or
for sure.
2012, it would have been now. Yeah.
And then, so there's a few years later, you sort of had a fork in the road and decided to move on from KPMG. What was the decision making behind that? And because you stayed on within Big Four, was there a period of time where you considered other options, or what was that process like?
A couple of points I would have. So after that point, after returning,
Mm.
there was a couple of points, and that was because that was the first time I sort of really started to take ownership
Okay.
of my career. Now I'm in my young 30s, right? So I'm like 32 or 32, 33 at this sort of time. So I'm starting to think, well, actually, if I don't, and I could drive the career through KPMG harder, definitely could have done that. But I started looking at, well, what else could I do, right? I've developed all these skills. I feel I'm in a good place. Maybe I should start looking at other alternatives. So I did. There's a couple of points I looked at corporate.
Okay.
I sort of got to a point, though, where I'm probably a little bit too senior for some of the roles I wanted to go for. And some of my skills there was always a gap. There was always a bit of a gap between, could I do this? Or I hadn't run a team. I hadn't run credit control before. I hadn't run a payroll team before. And so stepping into a senior finance role in a corporate was quite tricky. You sort of had to go back into a management account role where you didn't have responsibility for functions that you had no idea about, right? So, which makes a lot of sense. So there's always a bit of a gap, and you have to take a potential pay cut, right? That's what I did see. And so what would have driven my decision to ultimately go would be there was a bit of change again, and I was actually going seconded. The secondment I was on sort of came to an end, and I was going back to my old team. And at that point, I was like, well, it goes back to my point about that cross-skilling. I've done this other work. It had been a bit quiet. The team that I had gone to was pretty quiet team, this restructuring team, because it didn't have the insolvency power of like some of the external insolvency houses. It didn't have that. It was very much restructuring heavy advisory. And it didn't have a name. So we didn't have a lot of work over that period of time. So some would argue that I didn't do enough work to cross-skill, but I felt what I had done probably should be rewarded. Sure. And to come back into my old team and then sort of miss the promotion boat, I was like, at that point, I was like, okay, again, it's like, this is a sign that, yes, I maybe should have stayed and not done this comment or pushed back on this comment. I didn't. I did it. I think I got more skills, even though I didn't have an abundance of work. I still think particularly in client engagement, banking engagement, working with bankers, working with customers, working with distressed companies, I did think that I grew maybe, in a less a technical way, more the soft skills way, the sort of the interaction piece. So coming back into the old bit, and I've missed a couple of years now of that sort of what they had been up to, and missing a promotion, that was a trigger point for me to say, look, I don't know if I'm going to get promoted in 6, 12, 18 months, 2 years. I should certainly go and have a look around to see what other options are there. And that's ended up what triggered the move to Deloitte was that they saw something they liked and the promotion happened, straight away.
Yeah, gotcha. So the transition you were saying just then is so true. Like anything above manager level, making that move to commercial is really difficult, especially at associate director level. So is there anything in particular that you learned from that period that you'd give advice to for someone that is considering their options to move out into commercial and how to go about it? Anything in particular that would be a takeaway?
So move within consulting, is that?
No, sorry. If someone was at AD or director level and they're wanting to move into commercial, let's say.
Oh, moving into commercial.
Yeah. Because it's a pretty difficult transition.
Yes, be realistic. I think if you really, truly want to do that, you have to be prepared to take a backward step, potentially in your earnings, right? And so how you're structured personally really matters, like, with what your own personal cash flows are and aspirations are. Yeah. I think you have to take a longer term view. I don't think it's I've done all this great work in consultancy or Big Four, and I can just take that and get credit. You start again, right? But you start again in a different way because you might understand an awful lot about analysis, an awful lot about the financial performance, etc. But translating that into action and to deal with performance reviews, etc. That's actually quite a big. When you really putting the human element on. You got to remember the likes of KPMG and Deloitte talent gaps are really tight. They are generally very high aspirational people, highly educated, highly qualified, doing great work, super clever, and always aspiring to have that next job, wanting to step up and take that next role. When you go to corporate, it's very different. So if you wanted to take the step, you've got to humility has to kick in because you can't come in and necessarily run as fast, ironically, as you think, as you have been doing, because actually you've now got to work cross-functionally with people who don't necessarily share the same aspirations as you any longer and have a very different setup. So it was, yes, that's my advice is a bit of humility and be realistic about what why you're moving and who you're moving to and do your research. Because moving to a corporate, which is a huge international conglomerate with very set up sort of workflows, procedures, a matrix style, etc., is great for some people who like to have clear direction on what they can and can't do and how they go and function their job and have big playbooks, etc. And then there's a smaller end of town whereby you might be writing the playbook. But what do you know about writing the playbook? If you've only known sort of consultancy type work or project type work, the playbook is something that's a bit alien to you. So you can actually jump into something that you've got all these high skills, but actually you're not really equipped for. So you need to do your research.
Yeah, no, fair. And
ask questions in your interview and ask questions in your interview that will actually direct you to make a decision, yes or no. You have to decide. Don't be desperate. You don't want to be desperate. You want to have that conversation. And can I work for this person? Can I work for this company? And if you can't come away going, I can,
Mm.
then you should certainly not just take it because it's there.
Okay. Okay. Good advice. And so, what was the transition into Deloitte like? Did you find much of a difference between the two?
Found quite a material difference
Yeah. Okay.
in their way approaches, and that's not a bad thing. KPMG, I'll say, is incredibly corporate. I
Yeah.
think it was very structured. I guess I've been institutionalized being there as well, because I've been there
Yeah.
since
Yeah.
2001 or 2000 if you go back to the secondment. So I've been, this is now 2013 or so, 2014. So I've been there a long time, and had success, I had failure. I've gone through the whole the range of emotions, the good, the bad, the ugly. So moving into Deloitte's, I found it a lot more freewheeling. I found it a
Okay.
lot, not loose type culture, but looser
Sure.
than
Sure.
KPMG, which
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I found interesting. I think the talent gap at KPMG was tighter and Deloitte was wider. So the
Okay.
best was good in both. But I think
Yeah.
the entry level, some of the entry level staff, I think Deloitte's had a wider pool they picked from and their
Yeah.
bigger staff base than say KPMG, and it was bigger and it had acquired obviously over time. So I
Yeah.
think there was a wider gap. It was good for me because it threw me in the deep end really quickly. So
Yeah.
I found that I picked up an awful lot of work very quick. Almost drinking from a fire hose probably is the right term, I think. And I found that first year incredibly fast paced and rewarding. And I learned a lot and I found I had a lot of access to partners and really understanding how the rhythm of Deloitte worked.
Mm.
But I think, I think just the structure was so fundamentally different. It was difficult to know who to go to outside of your team. It was less. I felt less comfortable. Could have been time, hadn't been there long enough. But with KPMG, you just seemed to know where to go when you needed something. And
Mm.
as Deloitte, I was having to learn that on the fly. It didn't seem as coordinated. But in saying that, it might be the genesis. Deloitte's consulting heavy, and then I would say it's always known for people talk about consulting first, and KPMG
Mm.
talk about auditing first, and maybe
Okay.
that's a
Gotcha.
cultural thing they had. I'm not sure, but it was like that first year was incredibly fast paced, and I
Yeah.
really enjoyed it. To be honest, I actually really enjoyed what I was doing in that time.
Yeah, nice. And so towards the back end of Deloitte, you ended up starting your own business. And like you were saying before, being institutionalized, I see it quite a lot in recruitment businesses. So where they're coming in from a larger recruitment company and they're thinking about starting their own thing, but they're not sure about back office support. They're not sure if they're ready to make that move and start their own thing. Did you have a similar thought process or feeling when you were starting your own?
How long have we got? So you've jumped a few steps. So I guess let me just round out the Deloitte experience. So my first year was incredibly fast, incredibly valuable. My
Yep.
second year was more geared towards, what next? Could I go down the partner track, right? And
Sure.
I wasn't cut out to be a partner. Deloitte
Yep.
or any other firms. I came to that
Sure.
realization, and again, it's having that self reflection and self awareness. Sometimes it's incredibly
Mm.
hard to admit to yourself that I was on a pathway. I've institutionalized is the right word. I've come and joined an institution and done everything I needed to do. And you go up and you have some downs and you go back. It had all that sort of career trajectory. It's never linear. So that's
Yep.
you gotta if you're looking at giving people advice, you've got to remember your career is not linear. You're going to have good and
Mm.
bad days, and you're going to have sometimes you're going to have more in a period more bad days and good days, and you feel on the downward flow. And it's how you pick yourself up and recover and go, like anything in life, really. So in that second year, I came to realization that I wasn't going to be a partner at Deloitte, and
Okay.
for me that was quite confronting in a way because you just
Okay.
assumed it was just going to happen, right? You
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
assumed that I do all this stuff, I'm doing this great work, I've got these great relationships, but then you hit that point where you suddenly realize this isn't what is going to take me. I'm not going to be there for it's 2 or 3 years time. I'm not here. So
Yep.
then you have to look, well, what am I going to do? It comes back to that control. Like, what am I going to do? And before we get to the setting up a new business, again, it was a trigger point to look at the external world. Now I'm even more senior than I was when I would have first looked at KPMG,
Sure.
and it didn't look good. Like it looked really hard. I don't think I got an interview, believe it or not. And I didn't
Right.
even target.
Okay.
I did not target a CFO job. I targeted a deputy CFO or head of FP&A. Two things I thought were quite like one supporting a CFO and learning from a CFO. That was hard.
Mm.
But it's a great role to get into if you can do it. But it's really they're quite rare to find. But I'd seen a
Yeah.
few, so I was trying to get that. And the head of FP&A because I'd been running analysis for years in this
Mm.
transaction world, and I thought this is a natural step. I got one interview with one division of one bank, and that was all I got.
Right.
And I don't know how many applications sent out, but I got one interview. So I
Yeah.
realized
Right.
that wasn't going to work. And then
Okay.
I'm looking at, and I actually drew inspiration, an IPO that I was working on at the time with Deloitte, and I go back to, this transaction has been pivotal. And there was someone they had on the inside who didn't fit, like he just didn't fit what they were doing. And I couldn't, I got to know this guy and found out he was a contractor, and then
Okay.
got to say what are you working on and building out the models and doing the stuff. And was like, wow, this is interesting. And then, of course, you're working with the numbers. So you quickly work out like how lucrative this is going to be for them. And I was like, wow, I could probably do their job 10% better. Right.
Yeah.
It was literally, it was like that. It was like I probably did their job 10% better. So I got to know them. I learned what they were doing. And I was like, yeah, you know what? I'm not seeking to compete or knock them out of the way. I'm like, but why? I've never even thought about this. So that was the genesis really of, realizing that my days at Deloitte were going to come to an end. I wasn't going to make partner.
Yep.
And then I didn't want to sit in like a structure that I was just going to run as a director as a career director. I didn't want that. I was too aspirational for that, but I'd seen that I didn't want that, the partner pathway. But in this case, I looked at this consulting. I said, well, I've seen a gap in the market. And I started looking at this mid-market advisory space going, yes, you've got accounting firms, et cetera, in there, but you don't have people who support a CFO.
Mm.
And that's what he was doing. He was supporting a CFO, helping get them through an IPO. And I was like, well, I've been doing this work as an advisor for years, not realizing the skills you're picking up and the intel you're picking up and the knowledge. And that was the genesis. I was like, I can do that role. And guess what? Development activity happens all the time. A corporate finance activity. Companies are either always being bought, sold, or listing. There's always something happening. So that was the genesis of it. I reckon I can make a difference and I can help with value for a company by jumping in and being that like support for a CFO who either has the technical skills but doesn't have a team, so doesn't have bandwidth to do the work, or hasn't got the technical skills. They've grown up through a company, through the corporate world, and grown up and basically gone through the levels, but never actually, a transaction happens once in a lifetime for a lot of people. And so they don't have the skills, but they might have the team. And I could help that environment too. And it's low cost because I'll be there for low cost and it's high value. So I wouldn't cost that much to come in and help. And a transaction to them is worth millions and millions of dollars. So for the fees that I would charge, I was actually, I thought personally, I was quite good value because I could come in and help with things, whether it's drafting documents, whether it's helping analysis, helping Q&A preparation, liaising with accountants, their lawyers, the bankers. And that was it. I was like, there is a space here for someone to come in and help these companies, what we call the mid-market, because they don't want to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in fees to advisors to come and do it for them. So that was the genesis of it. So did I ever think I'd do that? Go back a few years? No. I thought I'd be an employee for effectively just going all the way through. I didn't think I'd have the confidence to do it. But there was a moment in me that said, well, my only way to change the game is to take a big risk. And it really was a risk. But again, you know how you were talking earlier about sort of like, what sort of you had to do to move forward into things like that restructuring. The same mentality kicks in. I'm like, it's like, I see an opportunity. I'm going to take the opportunity. I don't know if the opportunity is going to work or not. I don't know if I'm going to succeed or fail, but I'm going to have a go. Right? I'm going to back myself. If I put myself into this position, I'm going to make it successful. I'm going to will myself to success. Right. So, and thankfully it did. It worked. It worked amazingly well. So I can look back on it now but it didn't have its uncertain moments where I started out and I was like, have I done the right thing? Right. You got a mortgage, you got a family. Have I done the right thing? I did go through that a few times.
What was the first couple of years like in that period?
Well, it only lasted 2 years to start with. Okay. So it's 2 years because eventually I ended up here. So the amazing thing was, it was of all things, I think I left Deloitte's, I finished up my Deloitte time, finished up my notice period, etc., and had to go and buy a laptop, right? So I've taken a couple of days just to recharge, just to do, just to go, hey, I've got nothing to do today. I've got all my, and I've not like I haven't done any pre-work. I've gone around town. I've spoken to various private equity houses that I used to do work with. I've prepared some documentation. I've got my marketing materials. I've got collateral ready to go, right? I've got my, as you said, my go-to-market. I've set that up and I've put things in motion. Now I'm actually a complete free agent. I've got a couple of days. I take a couple of days off. The Monday and the Tuesday I take off and just do nothing. I'll just really just say, hey, this is great. I've got nothing to do. I've got money in the bank. I've obviously just left and I've been paid my final pay. I've got some cash saved up. I'm okay for, a little bit. I'll just take a couple of weeks to find my feet. And then I realized that I need to get a laptop. And this is true. So I have never owned a laptop because I've always had it for work. So I go to JB Hi-Fi somewhere and I've gone and bought a laptop. And on the way back from the city, back home, I get a phone call from Deloitte's, of all places. And one of the partners at Deloitte's, a guy I got Dave Haggart. I have a lot of respect. Really love Dave Haggart. He was one of the guys I worked with a few time. Amazing guy, right? And I still try and keep in touch with him to the day. And he said, what are you up to? And I was like, just starting going, looking for some work and stuff. He goes, are you free? Like this week. And I think we're coming up to Easter weekend, right? So I'm pretty resigned. I'm going to take a couple of weeks over Easter coming up. And he asked me if I'm free. And I said, well, I am actually. Yeah, I've got it. He says, we're doing this. IPO of a company called Elmo here, and they need a bit of help in their finance function because they're writing their prospectus. The CFO, as normal with an IPO, is overwhelmed with all the amount of stuff we've got going on. It just needs 3 to 5 days worth of help to help get the financial section of prospectus done and just a bit of project work. And I said, absolutely, that's fine. I'll give me the number and I'll give him a call. And so called up I got Trevor Lonstein, who's a great, fantastic guy. And my first conversation with Trevor is like, tell me where you're up to. So he talks about the IPO, and it sounds like it's really much more progressed than it actually turned out to be. Right? It's like a lot of, and then I just started talking to him, and I could hear in the voice. I said, Trevor, my job is probably the sales pitch I used at the time was my job is to take the stress away from you. And I just heard him on the phone just sort of relax, and he said, that's what I wanted to hear. So I said, fantastic, I'll be there tomorrow. So I turn up. My laptop, I don't even think I've set it up properly yet. So I'm now in the Elmo offices. It was in Bondi Junction at the time, and sitting down with Trevor and going through. And I go, okay, so show me where everything is, and we go through it. And then and you can never underestimate how much time is involved in some of these projects. And I end up being there for 5.5 weeks. I was there 5.5 weeks. So 3 to 5 days turned into 5.5 weeks, because when I realized like what they had to get done, it was a lot wider than what done, and there was things needed finishing off. And I just said, Trevor, I'm just going to be your support. I'm going to come in whenever you need me here, and I'm going to just work by your side and get these things done so you can focus on your day job, because you really need to make sure you're running the business, because with an IPO, you do not want to miss the numbers. You put forecast out, but you're going to spend like 20 hours a day trying to get everything done. Let me take that 10 hours away from you so you can focus on what you need to get done, and I'll work with you and get this done. And we built up a fantastic relationship. And Elmo was successful listed. So they're listed in June of 17. I started my work with them in April 17, and helped them get there. So that was fantastic. So that was my first job. And then I had like a 5-week hiatus where then I was like, okay, so I've done that, but thankfully I got paid. I've got, let's say, working capital, and then I don't have another piece of work for 4 to 5 weeks, but I've got confidence. So I've been a bit emboldened. Now I've know that I could do good work. I've proven to myself, and then I'm out on the road. Now I'm meeting people. I'm using LinkedIn as a medium to sort of spread the word of what I'm doing. That this has been successful. And then I got a former KPMG colleague. She called me, and she was a CFO of a listed company, and said, hey, I'm not sure if this is for you. I've just seen what you've been doing, and we're going to raise some money. We're looking to an acquisition and raise some debt, market and equity raising. Would you be interested? And I was like, absolutely, I'll be interested. So I came along, and again, we had another one that raised the money, they raised the debt, and another. So then I started to get momentum. And after that point, honestly, from, I can't remember when that completed, probably about November time or so, I didn't have any gaps in my diary until I ended up joining Elmo as a CFO. I could have filled up every day with work. I had a pipeline, I had continuous work. I had to manufacture time off because it was so much was there. I was subcontracting people in that used to work. So along the way with the KPMG and Deloitte days, I met some fantastic people who also moved to the outside, and they might have been out of work and they were looking for things. And I would contract them on a project and get them working because I had too much work. But it was fun. It was really fun because you were making good money. You were meeting amazing people, building networks through the banking community and the accounting community, the legal community. So really, and that would just, every time you got a good result, you would then get more opportunities that would that flow from that. And so to start getting repeat work. And so it was really doing a great job. It was super fun.
Back to the Elmo IPO. What work goes into a successful IPO? What do you need to be aware of? What do you need to be across, and just to ensure that it goes to plan?
A lot of planning, a lot of coordination. Oh, there's so much to it. It would be too hard. We'll take up too much time on this call, but to make it successful, you have to all be on the same page, right? The executive team has to be on the same page. The sponsors who have got to be on the same page. Everyone has to be working in unison, because if it's too speed or fractured, it really can derail really quickly. So it's about having that coordination. And I like to think I was a bit of the glue in that to help some of that coordination and get things across the line, demystifying things and consulting with the right people, making the calls at the right time. A lot has to go right to get an IPO. A lot has to go right. It's very easy for it to fall off the tracks quite quickly. Success in IPO is hard. It is hard.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But when it works, it's very, very, very lucrative if you get it away.
And so how did the full-time role come up with Elmo? How did that transition?
I joke, I think they got tired of paying my fees, because for the 2 years after Elmo listed, I just helped come in, and they were doing some M&A, buying a few companies. So I'd help with that project management, help with the diligence process on some of the small ones, some of the large ones. I'd help sort of coordinate and help give extra arms and legs. So I think I did that for a couple of years, and I built up a lot of trust and rapport with the executive team at the time. So I think by doing that, I just built a lot of familiarity. And so when Trevor decided to retire, so the guy's gone through a couple of years post IPO, and I think Trevor had a plan. He wanted to retire and go more in consulting himself. The opportunity came up, and so I was put in the mix at that time because I think I'd done a lot of work with the CEO, Danny. Danny was the CEO at the time and founder of the business. Built up a great relationship with Danny over the years. And so it made a lot of sense to, become part of the story when it sort of put to me. Notwithstanding, I had to still wrap up a lot of consulting projects that I had running because I built a big book. I had to sort of do that transition, which was challenging, but it was, it made a lot of sense, put it that way, at the time.
So it was your first full-time role with the business as CFO?
Yes.
How was that?
It was I would do a lot of things differently if I took it on again. I think I learned a lot very quickly. I learned to build up the support network incredibly fast. I had to build rapport with the people that were here, and I had to build and I brought in certain talent as well that I knew would help me as well, because we're straight into reporting season. So I didn't have much time to learn. Now, remember, I've been advising the business on buying assets. I hadn't been working on the inside of the business. So the IPO was 2 years ago. So what had happened inside the business, I wasn't really across, but I was very much across what we had bought or what I helped them buy. So I had to learn very quickly, a very quick apprenticeship into the company's inner workings. And that was a very accelerated program, because you're then talking to investors about results. And there was an awful lot I didn't know that I had to, I was taking lots of notes, lots of understand the questions, understand the key pressure points. And so not only was it CFO of just going into CFO, it was CFO of a listed company straight away. And so I had to really leverage people internally to get the knowledge as quickly as I could and to learn as quickly as I could. And I think, again, I sometimes think I just have that ability just to, you lock onto an opportunity, you take the opportunity, and you just get there. You find a way of getting there. And I managed to get there through that reporting season. Wouldn't say it wasn't stressful. I think it was highly stressful because there was so much I didn't know that I was trying to learn and backfill knowledge and make sure that the investors were getting what they needed. And if I had to follow something up, that I followed it up. And going through the early process, that accelerated onboarding, I think probably helped pave my way for them what sort of came next in the ability to get things done. So yes, it was a very interesting time. But look, the executive team at the time, that was fantastic level of support to get that knowledge, because I couldn't do it on my own. I'm not that good, right? I'm not that clever. So there's no way I could have done that on my own. I really had to lean on, particularly people like Danny, to lean on their knowledge to really get to understand that. And Trevor had a long transition process, because I really had to leverage his knowledge as well. And so we agreed on that, and he coached me up into the day-to-day. Remember, I've never done day-to-day, never run credit control, never run a payroll function, never run a financial planning team, never reconciled accounts, right? Other than checking reconciliation has been done. So it was a real, fire hose again, real fire hose moment.
Can imagine.
I think I thrive in that type of environment. Yeah.
And then bringing it to present day at the minute. So what's that transition been like? How are things tracking at the minute?
Really, really well. So Elmo's gone through a lot of changes. So I know we might not have enough time to go through, but if you look at my 6 and a half years now in the role, so coming in CFO, so learning how to be a listed company CFO, and that's not a 6-month process. I reckon it took a good 2 years to be super, super comfortable. Obviously, incrementally getting better, but it took about 2 years. And in that time, we continued to acquire companies. We raised debt. We raised equity twice, and you've gone into COVID as well. So you've gone into from a in-office culture to now a remote culture, then to come back to a hybrid culture. So we had to go through all that. Raising equity, geographic expansion, moving to the UK, starting to acquire some bigger assets. So a lot of learnings from the smaller ones, looking at some bigger ones, market expansion, segment expansion, doing that. And then they're going through a tech sell-off. So going through where the share price was riding high at, I think 824 was a top point sometime in February 2020, I think it was, to drop into in somewhere in the low twos in 2022. So sort of having to live through that. But at all times, I'd made sure that we had cash in the bank. We had a good operating rhythm. We were cash burn, which was, tolerated by some and hated by others. And I think that cash burn was probably too uncomfortable for some people, not unreasonably so. But I think it was definitely part of the strategy was to grow fast by burning cash. And we had cash. We had a lot of cash in the bank. So it was quite a deliberate strategy. But I think people wanted to see us make that move to break even. So saw the move through to break even as well. That happened in 23. And in that time, of course, we've been delisted. We've got an offer from K1, so K1 Asset Management, who are a fantastic PE owner for us. They They could see the value. They could see that we could do the pathway going from negative to positive. They could see it. They believed us and backed the team, and it made a really good opportunity to do an exit. And I think for the older shareholders that have been in for a long time from Elmo's early days, it was a good time to do an exit. So doing that delisting, going through that. Not many people do a listing and a delisting in their career. And then after going through that what called transformation program, really turning Elmo from a negative margin business into a positive margin business, generating cash, doing more acquisitions, working at a PE cadence, which is a bit different from a public cadence, and sort of their expectations there, and working with different level stakeholders. So yes, it's been in that 6 years, I've done an awful lot in that 6.5 years. And then you look down the horizon and you can see what we can do, what we're now looking at with AI coming in and what we're able to do on that and what we're able to do with our product and how we didn't just cut cost and put price up to get this turnaround done. We did a lot of structural things internally, really looked at how our workforce was structured, where we could really unlock value, what we could do with our tech stack, etc. Some changes in the executive team as well, just for people who could then take Elmo to the next level. So we're going through all that. It's been incredibly wild, excited, and then now we're set up for that next phase. And we can see what we can see on the horizon in our markets, Australia, New Zealand, and UK. Is pretty exciting.
Yeah, cool. And then, so what sort of stuff are you expecting in the next couple of years from the market perspective or the business perspective?
I see a great opportunity to really grow in that UK market. We're a little bit light in the UK in terms of penetration right now, but that will change. We brought a great asset in there, this rostering tool called Rotogeek. We bought that in UK, and that's got great potential to grow. We can build more HR functionality around there. So we're still quite underpenetrated. We think we can grow that UK market quite aggressively. And in the home market in Australia, there's some structural things happening which are quite exciting, going to create some tailwinds. And we can really see that how we can evolve our product here. So some of the things we're doing, our product and technology here. So my role has really expanded beyond just looking at financial numbers and talking to the financial book into the more operational side. So I oversee a few things operationally and seeing what we're doing in the product and how we're going to unlock a lot of value for customers. So one of the big changes in my mindset that took over the last couple of years was switching from let's say a finance silo mindset into a customer mindset. Like if you look after your customer, everything else will follow. And we really buying into that sort of philosophy. We go to customer first business, customer led business, and we listen, we iterate their product, we evolve the product to what they need. And I think some of the stuff that we're doing is going to be, quite innovative. I'm pretty excited about what we're going to see in the next couple of years.
Very cool. Well, thanks for your time, James. It's been really, really interesting hearing your journey because it is so different to most CFOs' trajectory through their career. So it's been great to hear. And I think the listeners would agree as well. If there's anyone that has any questions or anyone that wants to reach out and ask you anything in particular, are you happy for that?
Of course. Anything, if happy to.
What's the best way for them to get in touch?
Probably go through you first, Tom, and then we'll go from there. Rather than put my email out. I don't know if I'll be inundated with responses, but LinkedIn is always the easiest place to go first, I guess.
Perfect. Well, cool. Again, thanks so much for your time, James. It's been great.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the CFO Track. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with a friend. I'll see you next time.